Hello everyone, and welcome back to A Tribute from Hollywood. Today we pause to pay tribute to the American stars we've recently lost, along with other cherished figures whose influence touched lives far beyond any screen or stage. If this video means something to you, we'd be grateful for a like. It's what allows us to keep making these tributes with the attention and sincerity they deserve. Thank you for watching. Now, let's get into it. Some faces don't make you stop and stare. They don't ask for that. Instead, they settle into your memory quietly, like something you've always known. Richard Donat was that kind of face. He has passed at 84. You might not place the name immediately, but the presence, that's harder to forget. If you spent any time with Haven, you know exactly who Vince Teagues was. The man behind the desk who always seemed a few steps ahead, carrying something unspoken behind his eyes, quietly amused by a world still catching on. That kind of performance isn't manufactured. It comes from somewhere real. That he carried a legacy with him. His older brother Peter Donat, recognizable across decades of film and television. His uncle, Robert Donat, a figure from an earlier era altogether, the kind of actor people in their 70s and 80s still bring up almost reverently. That lineage runs through Richard's work like a thread you can feel without being able to name. Understated. Practiced. Never reaching for more than necessary. He was born in 1941, came up when television still felt intimate, before everything accelerated, before every performance had to announce itself. And yet through all of it, he kept showing up. Year after year. There's a particular kind of integrity in that, no grand gestures, no manufactured moments, just the work, steady and accumulated over time. Actors like him don't anchor a scene by taking it over. They anchor it by being exactly what it needs. Remove them and something goes wrong, even if no one can quite say what. And now he's gone. Which feels strange, because people like that always seemed like they'd just be there. There are voices that pass through you, and then there are voices that take up permanent residence. Tony Bennett had the second kind. He passed at 96. The confirmation came quietly, almost gently, fitting, given how he carried himself in his final years. No fanfare, just the gentle closing of something enormous. If your life touched the 1950s or 60s at any point, you didn't discover Tony Bennett so much as absorb him. He was already woven into things, drifting through car radios, coming out of kitchen speakers, filling rooms where the evening felt unhurried. I Left My Heart in San Francisco wasn't just a chart success. It became part of the fabric of how people remembered their own lives. And then came the rarer thing, he endured. Through the 70s. Through the 80s. Through every era that tried to make what he did feel old. He didn't fight the changes. He simply didn't need to follow them either. His world was standards, jazz, music that makes space for you rather than rushing you through. And when he eventually stood on stage beside Lady Gaga, people acted surprised. They shouldn't have been. He'd always understood that genuine connection crosses every boundary of age or genre, as long as you stay honest about who you are. Away from the spotlight, he was a man who had served in the Second World War, seen things that leave marks, and still built his entire life around beauty and craft. That's not a small thing. 70+ years of staying relevant is never an accident. It happens because something in the work keeps finding people, new ears, new generations, new reasons to listen. And now his voice belongs to history. But somehow it still feels like it's somewhere in the room. Before the fame, before any of it, there was just a boy navigating New York City. Born April 3, 1944, into a world that offered very little patience and even less cushioning. His family didn't have stability to spare. There was movement, pressure, uncertainty, the kind of childhood that doesn't give you time to feel sorry for yourself. When his parents separated while he was still young, whatever steadiness existed shifted further away. Those moments rarely announce their significance while they're happening, but they shape everything that follows. Music, for him, wasn't a dream in the romantic sense. It was closer to a foothold. A way to carve out space in a world that wasn't making room. By his teenage years he was already pushing into spaces most kids his age couldn't imagine, not out of confidence necessarily, but out of necessity. Auditions came. Rejections followed. Progress was slow and uneven. And still, Something kept him at it, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet refusal to walk away. The early 1960s brought a crack of light. A recording chance, nothing guaranteed, nothing promised, but enough to step toward. And maybe that's the truest thing about those early years, it wasn't pure talent that kept him moving. It was the stubborn choice to stay visible when disappearing would have been easier. Something was taking shape, even when no one outside a small circle could see it yet. The world eventually said his name. Tony Orlando. But it didn't happen overnight, and the road between those early sessions and real recognition was long. In the mid-60s, after those first recordings, he actually stepped back from performing altogether, not from disillusionment, but because the path forward wasn't obvious. He moved into the business side, working at CBS Records, learning the architecture of the industry from the inside, helping develop other artists while his own voice sat in the background. That kind of pause changes a person. You start to wonder if your window has already closed. Then 1970. A song that wasn't even supposed to matter, Candida, recorded without any grand intention, almost offhandedly. But the public responded differently than anyone planned. Knock 3 times followed, and suddenly Tony Orlando was everywhere. Tony Orlando and Dawn. Radio, television, living rooms across the country. By 1973 they weren't just charting, they were a household fixture. The Tony Orlando and Dawn show brought a warmth to television that felt rare, approachable, genuine, the kind of thing that didn't feel like it was performing at you. But visibility at that scale comes with a cost that isn't discussed in the press releases. The hours. The expectations that follow you off stage. The slow erosion of the line between the performer and the person. Somewhere inside all that brightness, something was quietly wearing down. Not visibly, not at first, but the strain was real. By the late 70s, the noise hadn't quieted, but something in him had changed around it. He had everything the world tells you to want. And something was still wrong. The early 80s brought a kind of retreat. Not announced, not dramatized, just distance. He stepped back. Later, with time and perspective, he'd speak honestly about what those years held: anxiety, emotional exhaustion, a heaviness that didn't have clean language around it at the time. There's a particular disorientation in struggling privately while your life looks charmed from the outside. He didn't dress it up. He didn't rush through it either. What came back wasn't the same man. It was someone more grounded, less driven by external measure. A different tempo. He returned to the stage eventually, but with more stillness, more self-awareness, someone who had learned what remained when everything else was stripped away. In time he became a genuine advocate for mental health awareness, speaking plainly about experiences his generation rarely voiced. Not as a campaign, just as honesty. Today Tony Orlando still performs. Still shows up. Not running towards something, not running from anything, just present. For those who grew up with his voice, who remember exactly where they were when those songs played, he represents something that didn't unravel. Not a perfect story, not simple nostalgia. Something more honest than either. Because after everything, he's still standing. And somehow that's the most meaningful part of the whole story. Some men write songs. Others leave traces of themselves behind inside them, and you only realize it later when the song knows something about you that you hadn't put into words yet. Kris Kristofferson was that kind of writer. He has passed at 88. The news settled over things quietly, the way it does when you lose a voice you'd simply assumed would always be somewhere in the background, still adding to what it had already given. If you were paying attention in the late 60s and 70s, you remember how his words started turning up everywhere. Not with fanfare, just with weight. Me and Bobby McGee. Sunday morning, comin' down. Songs that seemed to arrive already worn in, already lived through. And that room in Nashville, Johnny Cash, Shel Silverstein, Fred Foster, the kind of gathering where stories moved like currency and the air felt heavy with something being made. You can almost feel the atmosphere from here. What always distinguished him was the road he took to get there. Rhodes Scholar. Army captain. Helicopter pilot. That alone is a complete life. And he walked away from all of it for the uncertain business of writing songs. Not the safe kind. Not the commercially calculated kind. The honest kind, the ones that cost something. He stepped into film the same way. A star is born, alongside Barbra Streisand, present without needing to dominate, grounded in whatever scene he occupied. That same quality ran through everything he did. A restlessness in him, but contained. Like someone who had taken stock of exactly what life could remove from you and what it couldn't. And now he's gone. But those songs don't behave like finished things. They keep finding new ears, keep meaning something slightly different depending on when you come to them. That's the mark of work that was genuinely true. Some actors make their entrance and immediately command the room. Others simply walk in, take their place, and somehow everything adjusts around them without anyone quite noticing how. Alexander Morton operated in that second register. He has passed at 81. The news came simply, without elaboration, and perhaps rightly so. For anyone who spent time with Monarch of the Glen, no elaboration is needed. Archie Mackenzie. You can bring him to mind without effort, can't you? Standing out in the highlands, weathered and watchful, a man who understood his landscape without feeling the need to narrate it. There was humor in him, not performed, not inserted for effect, just resident in the way he inhabited a scene. That show aired in the early 2000s but felt like it came from an older tradition of television entirely. Patient. Unhurried. The kind that trusted its audience to stay with it. Morton was born in Glasgow in 1945, shaped by a generation that understood difficulty as a given rather than an exception, and that understanding showed up in everything he did on screen. No shortcuts. No excess. Just the quiet delivery of something true. I've always thought performers like him were among the most essential, precisely because they weren't positioned as essential. They were the connective tissue. Remove them and the whole thing starts to feel slightly unbelievable, even if you can't identify exactly why. There's something deeply recognizable in the kinds of men he chose to play, men rooted in place, inhabit, in a version of the world that doesn't feel the need to explain or justify itself. And now he's gone. But those hills, somehow, still feel like he's somewhere just out of frame.